We have a very exciting interview with Stephen Gutowski of The Reload to talk all about gun industry trends and what's going on with our Second Amendment rights, including what the anti-gunners have planned for all of us. Stay tuned for this really important interview coming up next. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, constitutional attorney, best-selling author, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and proud American gun owner. If you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do show your love for the right to keep and bear arms. All right, guys, we have a huge day today. Very excited to have Stephen Gutowski here of The Reload. He is the man, to say the least. If anybody knows anything that's going on in the Second Amendment community in the gun space, it is Steve, and we're very excited to have him here. So, Steve, welcome aboard.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's very kind of you to say that.
Great. And Steve, of course, you used to be with the Washington Free Beacon before you started your company there, The Reload, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I've written for a number of other outlets as well, the National Review, the Atlantic, pretty much everything out there, Washington Examiner magazine. So I'm writing a lot for Discourse magazine now. So I've had a good history of being able to get published in a lot of different places.
Yeah, you're definitely the man, Steve. And by the way, I should let everyone know that you're actually an NRA certified firearms instructor, so you know all about firearms specifically, which is great.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that's one of the things that makes The Reload a bit different from other news publications, because I have the actual knowledge of how firearms work to back up my reporting, which is not very common in our industry.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to want to talk about, what role you play in terms of giving information to a lot of those big city anti-gun reporters that write all about guns in the Second Amendment, but have never actually touched a firearm. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. So why don't we just start off here? Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what is The Reload and why did you start it? It really is a unique, company. It's a unique product in the gun space. But why did you start it? Was there a gap or something you felt needed to be filled?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. There's a lot of gun publications where you can, and YouTube channels and all sorts of influencers out there who know a lot about firearms and can review a gun a lot better than I could. And there's a lot of people who in the major media space know a lot about what goes on the Hill and know the interactions that happen in Congress better than I do. But there aren't a lot of people who know the guns and know the politics well. And that's the kind of gap that we're trying to fill with The Reload. Trying to report in a sober, serious way about gun politics at a national level so that we can explain to people what's really happening in Congress with these gun bills that are going through. Is this bill going to pass? Like the assault weapons ban, for instance, right? It passed the House. Is it going to pass the Senate? Is it going to become law? That's something that, you might see a lot of people who just don't know a lot about the topic say it will or imply that it's highly likely, when in reality it's highly unlikely that that's going to pass. That's just one of the examples of how things, I think, get misconstrued on in pro-gun media. And then there's probably a whole mountain of examples of things that get misconstrued in major media. Very basic facts about firearms, like the difference between semi-automatic and fully automatic, are things that are commonly misconstrued when you're watching major media outlets or reading major papers. And so there's a space that exists for an informed, sober, serious look at what's going on with guns.
And Steve, it's impossible to know exactly what caused this, but I have a feeling that your excellent reporting may have played a role. I think you saw a couple weeks ago, we've talked a little bit about this on the channel, the Associated Press style manual, which the mainstream media is supposed to generally follow the guidance of the Associated Press because they try to be objective reporters. I'm not sure they always get it right. Of course, I think they tend to have a left-wing bias like the rest of the mainstream press. But it's very interesting that the Associated Press came out with a statement saying that you really, if you're writing on the gun topic, you shouldn't be using phrases like assault weapon, because you're really talking about semi-automatic firearms, semi-automatic rifles. And it's amazing that after all these years of these propaganda terms, at least someone in the mainstream press took notice that, wait a minute, we're really not reporting this factually correct. What did you think about the Associated Press and that decision, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that's a really good guidance. I thought that they were making a good faith effort, sorry, a good faith effort at trying to inform their audience in a better way. There are a lot of terms that get thrown around in politics and in media about guns that are completely wishy-washy. They don't really mean anything. Assault weapon, to be fair, it is a statutory term in some states, right? Some states have assault weapons bans and they have definitions for what an assault weapon is. Like the House bill has a definition for what it is. The problem, of course, is that definition varies from law to law, and it's different. And so it's a nebulous term, and just using it to broadly talk about guns is not very accurate when you're trying to explain to a reader what the heck is going on. What does the assault weapons ban that the House passed actually do? Obviously, I think most people get that it has something to do with AR-15s and AK-47s, but most people don't really understand that it extends well beyond those guns, even though they're the main targets of this type of legislation. And it really bans all sorts of things, and it's based more on the cosmetic look of the gun, on these features that don't really have anything to do with how powerful or effective a gun is, but have more to do with whether or not it looks like a gun that is used by the military, right? And so, anything that's put out there by the Associated Press, which is extremely influential in the journalism space, that tries to encourage reporters to get closer to the core of the issue and better at explaining what's really going on, I think is encouraging.
When you cover the gun space, it's actually very complicated, Steve. I'm sure you know this, right? Because you not only have to really have an understanding of, constitutional law, the dynamics of the United States Supreme Court, how cases get processed, not just at the U.S. Supreme Court, but also in lower federal courts and state courts. Then you combine that with all the legislative activity in 50 state capitals plus Washington, D.C., and then you have the whole regulatory body like the ATF and all these other regulations, the CDC, these administrative agencies get involved. Then you throw in all the media. Then you throw in all the technology about how guns work and what's a suppressor, what is the NFA, what is the Gun Control Act of 1968. It's actually a very sort of complicated area to cover. So how do you, Steve, at the Reload, and you really do excellent work in really making it understandable for a lay audience, but how do you capture all that complexity and try to convey it in an easy to understand style for readers that can be everywhere from just gun owners that are just interested in the topic all the way up to editorial writers for the Washington Post and the like?
Right. Yeah. And it's not easy, right? And you know this too, right? From your own work, that it's not an easy task to do, and it's really something that you have to spend years learning. Honestly, I mean, you have to read the legislation, you have to read the rulings that come down, you have to go out and shoot the guns and take them apart and understand how they work, watch videos about how the mechanics of these firearms actually function, and you have to have a certain level of passion for doing that, or else you're probably not going to be able to accomplish it consistently. You can obviously reach out to experts as well. That's another key area that's important to do, and not just the same 2 or 3 people every time, especially if they come from one particular viewpoint. You get a lot of, in the media, you get a lot of this sort of epistemic closure, right? You get this echo chamber of like not even understanding what the other side believes on a certain issue, whether you agree with it or not. You get a lot of just complete misunderstandings of the various popular positions that exist out there that are held by tens, if not hundreds of millions of people. Like the AR-15, right? You get a lot of like, why would anyone ever want or need to own these guns? And it's clearly a question that comes from a place of ignorance, because it's not as though it's a secret. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to go out and ask the people, or shoot the guns, or own one yourself. It's not that hard to do. It's the most popular rifle in the country. You might come to the conclusion based off your own, deeply held beliefs or values that people shouldn't own them, but you should at least be able to go out and understand it. And frankly, it's a process that takes years to get all of that together and to be able to, explain it in a way that people can understand. Because at the end of the day, like, you're not trying to write an academic paper, though those are certainly extremely important as well in this space, and understanding the history of the Second Amendment and regulation of it and so forth. But you need to be able to take all that information that you have and all those sources that you've drawn from and condense it down in a way that's both accurate and readable for most people, which is not easy. It's not super simple. Now it might seem by how often major media outlets fall on their face doing it, that it is very easy to just churn out more accurate and knowledgeable writing on guns. But I think, like any topic that involves a lot of knowledge gathering, it's not a simple task. And so, yeah, I mean, it takes time and experience and dedication, honestly.
So, Steve, when you read papers, and I'm sure you read all the papers every day as part of your great work at the Reload, but when you see these use of these sort of anti-gun propaganda terms, gun violence, ghost guns, assault weapons, weapons of war, and on and on and on, how do you sort of react when you see these? Do you just shake your head and roll your eyes and be like, here we go again? It's like they just, either they never learn or they do learn and they just don't want to change because, really a lot of the media seems to be desirable of more gun control, and they just want to participate in the process.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a general leftward lean towards most major media outlets that is something that's factored into why these things turn out this way. There's a certain truth to the idea that a lot of major media outlets are based in areas that are liberal, Washington, D.C., New York City, L.A., they're based in urban centers. They're staffed by people who tend to be more left-leaning. I think, though, that bias comes oftentimes from laziness and a lack of understanding, lack of information, lack of being informed on the topic. That is correctable, thankfully. That second part is much more easily corrected than just trying to change the entire worldview of a certain reporter. If the reporter is, as I think most of your beat reporters, your average, print reporter who works at the Post or the Times or whatever, wants to be accurate and wants to inform their audience as best they can. If that's the case, you can more easily correct things like, as with the Associated Press example earlier, terminology, or the sort of just repeating talking points that were given, that came from gun control groups. I mean, that's where all those terms come from that you're talking about there, in terms of, changing from gun control to gun safety groups. I mean, right. Those groups don't do anything about gun safety. I've always thought that it's a minor problem as far as covering guns go. I mean, I'm still focused on trying to make sure everybody is using accurate terminology, right. Having a very base level understanding of what, again, the difference between semi-automatic and fully automatic is, because that is something that comes up fairly regularly. And what, how our current laws actually work is another thing that's commonly misconstrued. You talk about the gun show loophole or the online loophole, which, referring to everything that's goes beyond gun laws, of course, but referring to everything that was designed to operate a certain way as being a loophole. The system was designed to capture commercial sales and regulate them and not private sales. So it's not really a loophole that it doesn't regulate private sales, because that was the intention of the law in the first place. But, you get the point. These things are at least correctable, I think. And I've had conversations with a lot of major media reporters over the years about how to better improve their coverage and how to, what's the best way to describe this. And they trust me because I'll give them like the honest view of like, here, at least I can explain to you what the different points of view are and what good sources of information would be on this, or where the disagreements exist and what they are, in an accurate and fair way. And so I think that's the approach that I take when I hear like when I'm trying to combat media bias about guns generally. Yes, of course, when I hear poorly reported stories or read them, I still do roll my eyes sometimes at the particularly bad ones. And I mean, some of them end up being very funny because they're just so absurdly wrong about things. But I'm obviously much more interested in trying to help people improve their reporting if they're interested in it. Not everybody is, of course, but I like to think most are.